Hey guys, Darcy here, and I want to do a series of videos on Luna and what it's like, what things that I enjoy about it from like a hip hop producer's perspective. There's lots of good videos on, all the little things you need to know, how to use the interface, little tips and tricks, all kinds of stuff out there. But I feel like a lot of it isn't towards the hip hop sampling community. And because there's an analog appeal to this DAW, there's a very specific like benefit from a producer's perspective in the hip hop game. So I wanted to like dive in and cover some things that I think is beneficial in a series of multiple short videos. So this first one is going to be on the channel strip and things that you can use within it. But before I get into it, you need to know that Luna is a free recording software, but you need to own one of their Apollos, Arrows, or rack mount devices. So it's free with an entrance fee, so to speak. So if you already own the hardware, then great, you are ready to go. But if not, then sorry guys. But so let's jump into it right now, okay? So right now I have a beat loaded up here, and I'm gonna quickly play it so you can hear it, and then I'm gonna go into three things that I think are really beneficial. So first, let's play this. Cool. So we got the idea. So first off, of the three things, I'm going to bring up the channel strip. So Luna is really big on short keys. So I'm going to go Command equals, and that brings up all of our channels, right? This is actually called, what is the view on this one? The mixer display. So this basically shows all your tracks. This is like all the DAWs that you're used to. And there's three things in here that I think are really like specifically are really good from a hip hop producer's perspective. So first off, let's go over the simple one or the quick one. So down here, we can see all of our outputs, basically where everything is routed to. All these tracks are routed to my drum bus. My drum bus is routed to my main. So, like that's a pretty straightforward thing. But one thing I think is really nice and may not be obvious to everybody is that it has multi-out on every track. So for instance, when I click on what it routes to, it gives me a list on the left-hand side of things I can output to. Now, your Universal Audio, Apollos, and all that stuff have some pretty intense and complicated routing options within them. I'm going to bring up the preferences so you can see this. So you see here within the IO matrix, you have a bunch of inputs and outputs, and you can configure them, and depending on your device, you have more or less. And a lot of these outputs, you could be either virtual, connecting to something else in your computer, or it could be something that connects to a physical hardware device. All kinds of things you could do. So let's say, for instance, I'm gonna go back. Double click there. If you, let's say, had an out and you wanted to send your sound to like an MPC or some kind of hardware, let's go back to, say, my drums, and we click on the main. We can hold Command and select multiple outputs. So all kinds of things you could think to do with this, but it's very beneficial if you want to get that analog feel or sound and you want to connect it to something analog. You can set something up. So this is a small thing to reference, but I feel like not everyone realizes there are multi-outs. You can do this on all your tracks, and there's probably a lot of interesting things you could think to do with this. It's going to come down to your use case. Okay, number 2, sends. So right now, I have some drums setting to my drum bus, right? And so what I'm going to do first off, I'm going to mute everything. And then I'm going to unmute my drums. So you're like, why is he not using solo? My mic is going through Luna, and if I solo, you won't hear my voice being recorded. So let's just listen to the drums again. Cool. So we have the send that goes into the reverb. Now, I think Pro Tools has a lot of these features, but other DAWs may not have the same features when it comes to sends, and just something I like to highlight about this. So first off, we have two ways of viewing the send. We can click this button, and it will minimize it to what looks like Logic's kind of approach, where it's just a little dial. But then we can open this up, and we have a couple of different controls. So pre means everything from sound, the volume that would get to the send of the channel strip before it hits the final fader down here. Whatever volume that is, if you have it on pre, will be what goes into your send. And when you turn this up or down, it won't affect how much is going into the reverb, whereas post means it's this much, like, percentage, but also based off how loud the actual fader down here is. Okay, now straightforward stuff. Then we have mute, which is basically just turn it on and off. If you decided maybe you we're sending to something, client's like, hey, I don't want this this reverb on this track, you can just mute it, but not delete it. Now here's the thing that I really like: the left and the right signal. Okay. And what we have with this is that we have the ability to send the sound and try to push it more to one side or the other. So think of the old school recording, like 1950s and 60s, when they had these like limited like recorders where they only had like so many tracks, and so they might record a specific set of sounds on the left and a specific sounds on the right, because that's what they were limited to. So you'd hear a singer and a piano on the right and a guitar and the drums on the left, and that's kind of interesting. But there were some interesting techniques that kind of came out of that in later years, and you hear it in like 2001 by Dr. Dre, where there was specifically reverb kind of on one side, sometimes louder for one instrument, and it wasn't like even or equal across the stereo spectrum. It was a little left to right. So let's play this reverb in, and then we're going to dial it in, and you can just kind of get a sense for it. Forgot to actually unmute the reverb. So you can kind of hear how the reverb is starting to sound different based on how we decide to pan it, so to speak. And so that really it could be really not beneficial, but interesting in how you want to creatively approach your production with that feature. So I know that maybe some does have this and some don't, but it's something to call out. Now, lastly, I'm going to just take that reverb back off. And I'm going to now unmute everything, and I want to show you the tape saturation. So Luna has tape, and the way this essentially works is that all the tracks, as the signal comes in, think of like a real studio with a real tape machine, right? You would have one big tape, and then you would have to feed what instruments you want to it, and you record that sound and then feed it back into your recording. Now, this is obviously digital, so some of that stuff is less complicated, but essentially the thing is, when you say set up oxide tape across all these tracks, they are sharing the same instance. So they are unifying their sound through that one plugin. It's not individual plugins on each individual track processing individually. It is all of them being kind of summed together and then kind of referenced back in. So let's first just hit play, and we're going to turn these all on in the middle of playing. You will notice a little bit of like lag when you hit it. It's just how it is. So it brings it more forward and more present, okay? So that's the first thing I like about it. Now, let's take a look at the presets. So when I click on the title here, it'll bring me up to the options of Oxide and Studer, which are the only two it supports right now. Now, also, one thing to note, you can have both Oxide and Studer per track, and then they each have their own different sounds. But again, there's only one instance of Studer across the whole song and one instance of Oxide across the whole song, but there could be two different tapes. So when I see the Oxide here, this little arrow, that brings up our presets. So let's click play and hear what the presets do to it. So it's changing the color of the sound and how it's processing. Now we also have the ability to apply different amounts of saturation, how much we're feeding to the tape through the individual tracks. So let's say, for instance, we'll click on the sample and we'll try to change how it sounds. Okay, so it's a little more apparent with the kick drum. So let's select everything and mute it. I'm gonna highlight the kick drum for this example. So something that's really important here is gain staging. How much gain you are bringing into the actual tape will determine how it sounds. So the kick is a very loud sound. So let's first take the saturation to -12. And I've muted too many things. Drums. So you hear that really flattens out. Now I want to make the point of proving why gain staging matters. So first off, let's listen to this hat main, okay? So when we listen to this, I'm going to bring this back to 0, and I'm going to bring it up and down, and we'll hear that it's going to add some kind of color to it. More dirty, more clean. Now, I already preset this up. I'm boosting this sound by -24. So let's bring this back to its original state. And then we're also gonna go to the track itself and bring that volume back up. And now let's take a listen to what it sounds like. We'll bring this to 0. I'm actually gonna boost this. Here it's even more subtle, right? And that's also because you can see this meter's barely moving. If this sound is even quieter, then it may not get much of any saturation. So something to keep in mind is how loud the sound is before it comes through, which is controlled by, first off, the gain on the actual clip itself. Can determine how much saturation is applied when it comes through that the tape. And you're using that same kind of preset, that same kind of feel across all your tracks. So you can dial them up and down if you like a preset for a certain set of instruments, but far less for others, or just, you know, not use it at all. So those are 3 things I think are interesting from the mixer, like channel strip perspective, being that there are multi-outs which you could use to hook up to like an MPC or some other type of hardware to get that analog sound. The fact that there is some little interesting things you could do with the sends in terms of panning. And one of the key things to Luna is the way that they're handling tape. It is no longer just apply tape to, you know, every individual track individually. You can now apply it to all your tracks and have more of a unified sound that comes through from your tape, which will unify and bring your track forward more in a more unified way, because I can't think of better words. So hopefully you found this helpful. If you did, drop a like. Put in the comments what you would like to see in Luna next. I got a couple other videos planned. In the next one, I want to go over dealing with the actual clips themselves. There's a lot of interesting things we can do there in terms of sampling and how we handle sounds. But anyways, hope you enjoyed this. Peace, y'all. I'm out.